All right, today what we're going to talk about is 9-2, solving ax squared equals b. And what you're going to find out is the big idea is it's a simple actual process. What you have to remember is we're solving for x for these problems. So if we got to get x by itself, what we need to do is we need to divide by a. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. My a's divide out, it leaves me with x squared equals b divided by a. Now, if you remember when we did the Pythagorean theorem problem is we took the square root of x to get x, and that's what we're trying to find is x. So if I take the square root of this and the square root of this, the square root of x squared gives me x, and then my answer is going to be plus or minus whatever this is. We don't know what it is because we don't know what b and a is. But in the next few examples, you're going to see how this all works out. But so we're going to end up with two answers, a positive and a negative square root of b divided by a. And this is what it says right down here. When b divided by a is not 0, the equation ax squared equals b has two solutions, a positive one and a negative one. Let's go take a look at a couple examples. So let's look at example 1. It says solve 2x squared equals 32. Okay? Like I said before, you want to get x by itself. So we got to get rid of this 2 that's on this side. Well, the inverse of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. Whatever I do to one side, I obviously have to do to the other side. My 2's divide out. Leaves me with x squared, kind of like when we had a Pythagorean theorem. What's 32 divided by 2? 32 divided by 2 is 16. Now, just like in our Pythagorean theorem where we get c squared equals some number, we want x. So to find x, you have to take the square root. Okay? When I take the square root of x squared, I'm left with x. And when I take the square root, you always have plus or minus the square root of that number. Well, the square root of 16 we all know is 4. So my answer is plus 4 or minus 4. Now, you could also do this on your calculator. I can put this in for my y1. I can put this in for my y2. Now, the only difference is when you type these into your calculator, okay, 2x squared and 32. When you type this into your calculator, this is my biggest number, 32. My y is 32, so you're going to have a horizontal line at 32. So what you have to make sure is that your window is greater than 32. Okay? So I got to make my y max bigger than 32, and I'm just going to make it 40. And I'm going to hit graph. So there's my parabola. There's my 2x squared. Okay? Here's my 32. Okay? Now, you can scroll up here and see where those two things intersect at. And sometimes you get a rounded answer. Notice 3.8. If I press 1 over, I get 4.2. To get your exact answer, if you hit second function graph to bring you to the table, okay, we want to see when both of these things are the same. Well, as you can see here, this is bigger than this. So we need to scroll up. When are those two things the same? Well, right here at a positive 4, 32, 32. So there's one answer. And we know with parabolas, once you found one, you have found the other. Because when you put in a negative 4, you also get 32s. So That's also another way on your calculator that you can get your solutions. X equals plus or minus 4. Okay? Two ways, calculator, by hand. Okay? You determine which one's better. Remember, you have to move your window up in order to see this one. You don't have to when you do it by hand. Okay? Moving on. Example 2 says, a quarter is dropped 60 feet from the roof of a school building. To determine how long the quarter will be in the air, use Galileo's equation D equals 16t squared. In the equation, t is the time in seconds. That is, it takes a heavier than air object to fall, d feet. Okay? Well, the quarter is dropped 60 feet. So in this case, 60 feet is our d. So I'm going to put that into this equation. 60 equals 16t squared. Okay? So now what I need to do is same process as before on the last problem. I am going to divide by 16. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Leaves me with t squared. Now, for those of you that don't know what 60 divided by 16 is, you go over to your calculator. 60 divided by 16 gives me 3.75. I need to find t though. So t is going to equal plus or minus the square root of 3.75. So I'm going to take the square root of 3.75. It equals, and I get 1.936. 1.936. So what that means is my ball that was up 60 feet in the air took 1.936 seconds to hit the ground. Okay? Now, should your answer be a negative 1.936 seconds? No. Why shouldn't there be two answers for this problem? Well, you can't have a negative 1.936 seconds. It's always going to be positive. So that's what you have to watch out for. When you have real-world problems, you're normally only going to use the positive answer to your problem. Moving along. Quiz yourself. Find how long it will take an object to hit the ground if it falls from the top of Chicago's John Hancock Center, which is 1,127 feet tall. So once again, I'm going to put it into that equation. D equals 16t squared. Okay? And now D in this case is 1,127. So 1,127 is equal to 16t squared. First thing I have to do, divide by 16. Divide by 16. For those of you that don't know what that is, 1,127 divided by 16 gives me 70.43. I normally always just round to the second decimal. Okay? Take the square root. Remember, real world problem, I'm only going to use the positive one. So I'm going to take the square root of 70.43 and it's going to give me 8.39 seconds. So it took 8.39 seconds for this object to fall 1,127 feet. Okay? Last example. Here's a good one. Multiple steps here. Solve 3 times the quantity, 2n minus 11 squared plus 75, or equals 75, sorry. Okay? So the first thing I got to do is get rid of this 3. Okay? You just treat this like your variable. Okay? You just treat that like a t squared in this case. Your 2n minus 11 squared. So I got to get rid of the 3. So the inverse of multiplying is dividing. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I get 2n minus 11 quantity squared equals 75 divided by 3 is 25. Okay? Now, just like we do a problem like this, the inverse, to get t from t squared, we take the square root, okay? Do it to one side, do it to the other, gives us plus or minus 4. To get rid of this square root here, or in order to get rid of this squared, we have to take the square root. Well, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Okay? When I take the square root of this, I'm left with just what is inside. So I had 2, now I'm down to 1, 2n minus 11. Now, that is going to be equal to plus or minus 5. Because the square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. From the positive end, from the negative end. Okay? So, follow my steps. Looks like an algebra problem. We're solving for n. So the first thing I got to do is get rid of this, subtract 11. So I need to add 11. Equals. Leaves me with 2n is equal to, and I got 11 plus or minus 5. To solve for n, I got to divide by 2. So when I divide by 2, my 2's divide out, leaves me with n is equal to 11 plus or minus 5 divided by 2. Well, here's my 2 answers. 11 plus 5 divided by 2, or 11 minus 5 divided by 2. 11 plus 5 is 16, divided by 2 is 8, or 11 minus 5 is 6, divided by 2 is 3. So my answers are 8 or 3. That is the conclusion of this lesson. I'll see you tomorrow.